Hello, everyone. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Today, we are going to have a look at the cost of production. This is what you learn in week 10. So, what are we going to think about is we're going to think about two different things. We think about the production and the cost because they both are related, right? When you got the production of something, there is a cost, right? And then we're going to think about what is the difference between short run and long run. What are costs, right? Cost is basically what you pay or what goes out of your bank account when you produce something to supply in the market, right? And you all know the supply curve is sloping upwards because that's basically what the supply curve is. Higher price you supply more. Now, why do you do that? Higher price you supply more is basically cost is the other determinant, right? If the cost is high, you're willing to supply less, right? So there's a very important part. So that's when you keep in mind. So your supply curve and your cost are both, not directly, but they are part of each other, right? So first we define something. Now profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost. Everyone knows that. So total revenue is P times Q. Total cost is just total cost. That's, if you know about it, it's fixed cost plus variable cost, right? Total revenue, the amount you receive by selling the product. Now remember, total revenue is when you sell your product, right? So P is price for product and quantity how much you sell. You multiply, you get total revenue. When you only sell one product, you do get a revenue, but the revenue is the price, okay? Because you only sell one product and that's the price you sell it, and what's you get your revenue. So total revenue is different from revenue of one product, which is the price, okay? Well, cost and opportunity cost. Now remember, I want you to think about two different kind of costs. You got explicit costs and you got implicit costs, okay? Now, implicit cost is another name for opportunity cost, let's say. Now, explicit cost is something that you actually record in your computer or in your book, right? Paying wages to the worker, electricity bill, the power bill. Sorry, the same thing. Electricity and power bill, the same thing. But then your raw materials, your rent. But implicit cost is something you don't record. It's something you could have done and it got you some money, right? Or what you had given up to do this business. Let's think about it here. Now, the idea here is, I don't go too deep into it. If you have 100,000 to start your business, right, and you borrow, let's say, at 5% rate, so at 5% rate you got 100,000, so you got 5,000 interest on loan, right? So if you borrow 100,000 and 5% is the interest, then 5,000 is what you pay. Let's say it's per annum you pay for your interest to the loan. Similarly, if you had 40,000 of your savings, then you don't have to borrow that whole 100,000, right? You can just borrow 60,000 and use 40,000 you're saving. But it really depends upon what your interest rate is. But if 40,000, if you put that in your bank account, you get certain interest rate. If the interest rate for 40,000 is more than 5%, then you wouldn't take that money out. You will instead borrow at 5% because borrowing is cheaper than your using up your savings, right? So your opportunity cost of using that 40,000 is the interest that you have to give up. In this case, if it's both 5%, but the interest, then obviously what you give up is your interest rate. You understand that? So basically, you decide whether to borrow or not. You got some of your savings. If you have to decide whether you use that savings or not, is that you have to think about the opportunity cost of using that savings. If you use that saving to start your business, then you're not going to get the interest on that money, right? Because you got to put that 40,000 of your savings in your bank account and got the money. You're losing that. So that's your opportunity cost, okay? So your economic profit versus the accounting profit. Now, economic profit is your total revenue minus total cost, right? But there's one extra thing here in economic profit. That means you need to include your implicit cost as well. So in addition, your explicit basically your cost, right? But then you have your implicit cost that you need to put that in, right? Implicit cost, your opportunity cost. So think about this here. If you actually start a business and suppose you start a business and you're getting 10,000 dirhams a month as a profit, okay? 10,000 dirhams a month. Write this down as a profit. But you're also a trained accountant. So you could have actually worked for somebody and you have earned 15,000 salary. So which one is giving you more money? 15,000 if you worked as an accountant would have given you more money. So you are basically losing 5,000 because you're only getting 10,000 from the business. So with purely economic point of view, you are making a economic loss of 5,000. Why? You could have got 15,000, but you only got 10,000 from your business, so you're losing 5. So that's your economic loss. But accounting profit is accounting profit 10,000 because you're making a profit of 10,000. You're not thinking about the money you lost, right? So keep this in mind. Now we examine the link between the firm's production and the total cost. So what I want to think about is that we are actually thinking about the short run. First, short run means at least one of the input is fixed. So let's assume that your area is fixed where you make your furniture, let's say. So think about the production function. So we only got the labor, right? Now in this case, if you think about Mahmood, he got the land, this is fixed, but then he got people who work for him to grow wheat. So this is what you're going to have a look here. So one worker, two worker, thing worker, you'll see that it's increasing, right? And you notice this thing here is actually decreasing. Now we'll learn about that, why that happens. Now we go into the marginal product. What is a marginal product? Now marginal product is simply if Mahmood tries to employ one more extra unit of labor, how much they add to the total production of wheat, right? So formula basically is change in quantity, how much extra quantity divided by how much extra labor. Usually we assume that labor is increased by 1 unit, so how much the quantity increased by. So let's have a look. Your marginal product, when from 0 to 1, the quantity increased by 1,000. From 1 to 2, it increased by 800. So your marginal product is basically that amount because the quantity denominator is just changing by 1 unit, but your quantity is changing by different amounts. So you notice this marginal product is decreasing. That's interesting thing to know. Now, another thing I just briefly want to mention, but I don't need to memorize or remember this in detail. It means the marginal product is basically the slope of the production function. That means how steep the production function is, right? So this is your marginal productivity, right? This is your this is your total productivity curve or production function. But then marginal product is basically the rise over run. That's your slope. That's what they're trying to slope. Now I'm going to trying to think at marginal product here, what marginal product is. Now, you talk about this marginal product, they're diminishing, right? What does it mean by diminishing? A diminishing marginal product. So let's have a look here, what happens. Cost of the land is the same. Cost of the labor is actually changing, right? Employ more labor, and total cost is also changing, right? So you add the cost of the land, cost of labor, you get your total cost. Now, look at this total cost. Sorry, I just sort of rushed past the diminishing. What I mean by diminishing is what happens is your marginal product actually decreases as you go through the time ring, right? If you look at this graph here, marginal product is decreasing. Why is that? I gave you a simple example. He got an area to do the land, right? When he adds the first labor, wow, marginal product goes up by 1,000. When he had the second labor, it goes up by only 800 and 600 fold. What happened? He's got a fixed amount of land, right? If you keep more labor, there's no tools, right? So, for example, to dig the ground, to plow the land, you need the machine. For tractor, for example. But if you one labor is there, you can use the tractor. Two laborers, okay, but three, four, there's no tractor. People stand around waiting here. So the third and fourth labor is not as productive, right? So that's what we're thinking about here. That's what we say. It does increase, the total product, it does increases, but marginal product is actually diminishing. That means still increasing, but by a smaller amount. Okay? Good. So let's go to production to cost function because cost is the important part. Now remember your total production was the inverted, but this is like a, it's like a, this is going that way, but the production was that way. That's why when production increases, the cost increases. So that's why it's the invert of that, right? Now, just like marginal product, you have marginal cost. But imagine marginal cost is to do with the quantities, not with labor or capital or land or anything like that. Is that when you increase your quantity, when you decide to produce one more extra unit of quantity, how much your total cost goes up by. Okay? Now, what happened to the marginal cost? Remember, marginal revenue was decreasing, but the marginal cost is increasing, right? So opposite. That's how you remember these. So see how it is. For a start, it was not too high. Then here shoots up straight away. Why is that? Remember the marginal cost. The formula for marginal cost is what? Quantity. So total cost increases when you add more labor, right? When you keep adding more labor, after a while the quantity start to decrease. So this is increasing too much, but this is not increasing as much because extra labor is not as productive, right? Diminishing. Once that kicking, you notice this here. Initially, it then shoots off because the labor is not productive. You keep adding more and more people to your land. You have to pay them high wage, but the quantity doesn't increase. Okay? Right. What happened is that why is marginal cost important? Now, when you want to employ, you will learn about this more. Probably, you connect this to the your perfect competition. Where perfect competition, how is it decided how much quantity to produce? Is when your marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So think about it here. When Mahmood employs an extra labor, he has to pay him extra cost. That's your marginal cost. But then Mehboob needs to think about, if he employs this extra labor, what that extra labor produces is the marginal revenue, correct? So he will need to think about a balance point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, right? Because if marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, then Mehboob knows whether to employ extra or not. Understand? Just think about it, your perfect competition, how that relates to it, okay? So now you got a fixed cost, variable cost. You know what the fixed cost is. Fixed cost doesn't vary when you produce more or less. It's like a rent variable is labor is the variable, because you want to produce more wheat or more furniture, you have to more labor. But the land is fixed. It's in short run, okay? So what does the cost curve looks like? So I just want to show you, fixed cost is just like, straight line. Then you have your variable cost. Then variable cost plus fixed cost, you get your total cost. Okay. Marginal cost, change in total cost divided by quantity. Marginal cost usually rises due to the diminishing. Now remember, this is keyword. Because there is a diminishing marginal product, marginal cost actually rises as Q rises. Okay, that's the relationship I talked about. Then you got the average fixed cost, which is the formula is vary. Anything to the average, you need to divide by quantity. So average fixed cost divided by fixed cost divided by quantity. Average variable cost will be variable cost divided by the quantity. Okay. Yep, simple as that. You can work this all out. Is all the calculation here, all the costs together. Just for you, you fill this in. This was pretty simple. I worked in the calculation in the class. Make sure you understand this, because this is in the exam. Now, why is average total cost usually U-shaped? Okay. Well, it makes sense. Average total cost is your total cost divided by Q. Q initially increases, right? And then it shoots up. When you add more and more and more and more Q, then the variable cost takes over, because they are not as productive, and variable cost becomes higher and higher and higher, and they just start to rise up, right? It's just because the extra quantity that you add is not as productive, okay? So cost initially starts to rise per unit. Now, at the minimum of your average total cost is what we call efficient scale, okay? Now, this marginality, average total cost and marginal cost, I want you to understand the relationship. If when the marginal cost is below the average total cost, so remember this quantity here, this is 2. At 2, the marginal cost is about maybe 40 something, but the average total cost is way high. So if marginal cost is below the average total cost, your average total cost is falling. The moment it goes up, right, at 5, the marginal cost is this, about 85, but your your average total cost is about 75, okay? And then as soon as the marginal cost is above the average total cost, the average total cost start to rise. So marginal cost basically pulls it down when it's below it, pulls it up when it's above. Where they meet is where you know your average total cost is at minimum. This point is the minimum, okay? Right, so you need to sort of distinguish in the short run and the long run. Let's have a look at the short run. There is a relationship. Basically, short run is when you can't change your land or your factory size. In long run, everything can be changed. So have a look here. 3 different factory sizes. So this is, let's imagine, for first 6 months, next 3 months, next 9 months, right? Different. You expand your capacity. And this is all the average total cost for those short period of time. Now you add them up, you get your long run average total cost, because if you add up short run, you get the long run, right? So every short run, you keep adding your facility. So for 6 months, your facility was, let's say, 10 hectare. Then the next 9 months, it was 15 hectare. And next 12 months, it was, say, 20 hectare. You add them up, you get the total hectare that you are now. Okay, that's the long run average total cost. And just like that, you get your long run. You add multiple cost curves and you get your long run average total cost. Okay. Now we divide this into 2. This is long run, right? As you keep producing more and more and more and more, for a start, your average total cost actually falls. And this is what we call economies of scale. When your average total cost is falling as you produce more, this is where your company starts and it gets bigger, and they make bigger factory and start to produce more and more. And then there is a point what we call constant return to scale, when they are actually, you produce more quantity, your cost doesn't change at all. And then you become too big, your cost start to rise. Why? When it's too big, too many expenses, people don't know what's going on, there's lots of different departments, there's inefficiency, okay? And that's what the coordination is difficult. All right, very good. Thanks very much, my friend. Bye-bye. Take care.